Then again, perhaps you do. Fantastic. Adjusting to global time zones in the spirit of what you just said. I'm sure there'll be an awful lot of questions from the floor, so I'm just going to ask one sort of mischievous question and then let the audience rip. Since Britain joined the then EEC in 1973, the total of 9 countries, 19 other countries have joined with something like 225 million people in total. 6 other countries have formal applications to join, including Turkey, so there's 140-odd million more people. The only sort of country that's left was Greenland in 1985, when it acquired foreign policy autonomy from Denmark, and so 30,000 citizens of Greenland presumably looked at the map and worked out they were nearer North America than Europe, and their linkage to the European Union stopped. It's sort of been one-way traffic, really, hasn't it? If the European Union's so bad, why are all these countries queuing up to join the horrible bureaucratic monster?
Well, Greenland left, actually, because Spain and Portugal were about to join. And Greenland quite sensibly said, hang on, under international rules, we have a 200-mile exclusive economic zone for our fish, and we're not going to share it out with the Spanish fleet. That's why they left. Just look at what's happened to the British fishing industry, where we're now allowed to catch, by value, 18% of the fish that are caught commercially in British territorial waters. So Greenland was right. The fascination here is that the political class, not just in Britain, but in every country in Europe, is in favour of the European Union. It's the politicians that want to join, regardless of the opinion of the people. The Swiss have said no 3 times to joining the European Union. If there was a vote in the Swiss Parliament tomorrow, the Swiss politicians would vote to join. The Norwegians have twice, very clearly, said no to joining the European Union, and current Norwegian opinion is nearly 80% against joining, but if there was a vote in the Norwegian Parliament tomorrow, it would be 50-50, I think, as to whether the Norwegian politicians voted to join. It is, for career politicians, the European Union is the best thing that has ever been invented. It is guaranteed to be a job for life. When MPs lose their job, when MEPs lose their job, provided they're in favour of the project, they're picked up by the European Commission, paid big 6-figure money, with a top tax rate of 16% and a guaranteed 2/3 final pension salary. And the real battle that is going on here, it is between the people and the politicians, and that's why I call UKIP the People's Army. But we need people's armies everywhere to stop this mad project.
Okay, that's a very seductive argument, but at least in some of those countries which have joined the EU, there have been referendums. Croatia, for example.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was there. It was monstrous. It was monstrous. I've been involved in these referendums, Tim. I've been involved in 2 referendums in Ireland. And what you see is a referendum conducted where the yes side outspends the no side by a factor of 50 to 1 or 100 to 1, where the press, are universally for a yes vote, and where when people say no, as of course the Danes did to Maastricht back in 1992, or the Irish have now twice to treaties, they're forced to vote again. I mean, there is something fundamentally wrong with the way in which this project's being foisted upon the people. And as I say, when the French and Dutch said no to the Constitution, they just rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty continues. So I genuinely think that there are some quite dangerous forces at play here.
So, okay, if the capacity of the middle class to set the contours of a referendum, if you put it very generously, is that powerful? And you make a very powerful point, and 1975 was a very lopsided referendum in terms of money spent and media attention and the rest of it. Which of those 2 scenarios would be best for an individual who dedicated their life to slaying the monster, to your conclusion? Scenario 1, David Cameron wins the election with an in-out referendum pledge, does a quick deal with Angela, not bundle laughs as you said, but does a quick deal with Angela, goes out to the people, takes most of the Conservative Party career leadership with him, Labour's with him, what's left of the Lib Dems are with him, TUC's with him, big businesses with him, probably most of the media's with him, and tries a rerun of 1975, scenario A, or scenario B, Labour wins the election without the referendum pledge, the Conservative Party in opposition goes, oh shit, and more or less adopts the UKIP position wholesale. So that the Conservative Party position, perhaps a joint Conservative UKIP position in 2020, is to hold a referendum and campaign for a no vote for the position of government. What's your better scenario?
Well, I mean,
what's going to get the monster dead first?
Let's just get this into some sort of historical context. You know, Dave, as he likes to be called, well, he's got the common touch, hasn't he? You know, he often doesn't wear a tie just to prove it. Dave won the 2009 European elections by a big margin, saying to the country, vote for me, and when I become Prime Minister, I give you this cast iron guarantee that there will be a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, and he let us down like a cheap pair of braces. I don't believe the bloke, I don't trust the bloke. In 2011, he was three-line whipping his own MPs to vote against a referendum, and then a year later, as UKIP's on the rise, Dave supports a referendum. The biggest, apart from the fact I don't believe him, there is one major problem with his negotiating position. You know, what I believe he's done, he's tried to park the issue, kick it into the long grass beyond the next election. He's already said that regardless of the outcome of the negotiations, and I suspect, you know, the only sort of concession we'll get is they'll say, you know, you can catch herrings in the Solent again, or something like that. I don't think anything serious is going to come out of it. But he's already said that regardless of the outcome of the negotiations, he will recommend a yes vote. Now, every single person in this room has been involved in business negotiations. And all of you know that when you walk into a room to negotiate, you carry a bloody great big stick with you. And the stick says, you know, unless you, Adonis, give me what I want, you know, I'm taking away my business. And all of us start that negotiation knowing that that's what's at stake. To walk in to the Council of Ministers in Brussels without a stick and to say, please give me something, but whatever you do or don't give me, I'm going to advocate we remain a member, is frankly a farce. So the position isn't satisfactory. He's also given no guarantees that when we have if we had a referendum, that it would be a full, free and fair one. Back to the earlier point about 75, I want an ombudsman to be appointed to oversee the referendum, to guarantee equal treatment on broadcast media and maximum spending limits for both sides of the campaign to make it real. As far as Ed's concerned, well, apart from Cleggy, who's finished, of course, a lovely cartoon in this week's, bit boastful this perhaps, but there's a lovely cartoon in this week's Spectator, and it's Clegg holding a sandwich board. And it says, the end of the world is Nige. I quite like that. So let's forget about Clegg, because he's a goner. But actually, the real losers from the European elections to UKIP weren't the Conservatives, it was Miliband. Miliband was really badly hurt by UKIP, and I still don't think that the commentators or the Ashcroft polling is really getting a handle on this. I mean, look at South Yorkshire. You know, everywhere from the Humber to Leeds, we top the poll, all in traditional Labour constituencies, and you're already beginning to see, even John Prescott, you know, Prescott, who's been a big advocate of the European political project, writing in the Sunday Mirror, saying, actually, UKIP are right. We cannot have a complete open door to 485 million people, and it's time this was put to the test. I think that Miliband will go into the next election promising, matching Cameron's pledge for a referendum. I believe that'll happen. And I think there is a possibility, not easy, but a possibility that if UKIP really gets its act together, we can hold the balance of power in that Parliament next year. And if that happens, there will be a referendum.
But if Ed Miliband made that pledge, would you trust him any more than double-cross Dave?
No, not really. Not really. Which is, no, I like that. I might use that. Well, I mean, no line in life is so good you can't steal it, is it? You know? No, and that's why, actually, for those of us that want a referendum on this, and it isn't just Eurosceptics, there are some on the pro side who feel it needs to be legitimised in some way. For those of us that want a referendum on this subject, it is vital that UKIP remains a strong party. You know, if UKIP was to have said, "Oh, Dave, aren't you absolutely bloody marvellous? We're going to close down tomorrow," I suspect the pledge would go. So I think they'll both promise it, but I think a strong UKIP is the guarantor of it actually happening.
Okay, let us open up to the audience. I'm sure there are plenty of questions here. I'm going to put a focus on actually questions from real people, i.e. delegates, because I think the journalists have had 24 hours of knocking Nigel around in various ways. Debbie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your insight into Europe, but something that particularly intrigues me is your views on women in business. I don't mean you in particular, Mr. Farage, because I haven't heard your particular view, hence the reason for the question. But I sit here as a woman in business, surrounded by my peers, mentors, and women that I aspire to in business, and also part of the Association of Women Travel Executives, who have been celebrating women in the travel industry for the past 60 years. And unfavourably, I've been quoting your party in some of our newsletters for your disparaging quotes on women in business and the fact that they should perhaps stay at home. So I wondered, from the horse's mouth, if you will, what's your view on women in business?
So, Nigel, to paraphrase, UKIP, not racists, merely sexists.
Oh, there is no form of abuse that's not been thrown at us. Can I just say that, unlike Miliband and Clegg and Dave, we have not gone for all women shortlists at all. I find positive discrimination to be wholly demeaning and wrong. I believe in a meritocratic society. I really do believe in that very strongly indeed. And I've just had elected, for us, 7 women who've been elected for UKIP as members of the European Parliament, 5 of whom have set up, created and run successfully their own businesses. All right, so we're actually going to have, for UKIP, some very powerful speakers on women and business issues. And we've done that without using, as I say, positive discrimination or all-female shortlist. Where I got myself into trouble on this subject was at a city brokers' breakfast. And the discussion was, why do women in the broking industry earn less than men? And I said, because in many cases they have families, which means they have periods away from work, which means when they come back after a few months off, they are worth less to their employer than they were before they went away. Silly old me, I told the truth. I should have just sat there and buttoned the lip. When I worked in the brokerage industry, I never took a fortnight's holiday. I never took more than a week away. You could not afford to be away from accounts who you spent 6 or 7 hours a day with on the telephone. That was the point I was making. We had one person in UKIP, in the shape of Godfrey Bloom, who had a sense of humour that I think would have worked very well at mess dinners circa 1956. And it was all meant to be a jolly hoot about women not cleaning behind the fridge and all the rest of it. And actually, when you heard him say these things, he was actually genuinely attempting to be funny, but it led to us being traduced as being a sort of 1950s political party that wanted women back in the kitchen, and that could not be further from the truth. And if you've perhaps noticed, over the course of the last few weeks, some of those women that have been elected for UKIP have now been appearing on the television. Last week's Question Time, Louise Bors, an actress who's been elected for UKIP, was on Question Time with the whole panel rounding on her, and I thought she did brilliantly, particularly with Joey Barton, the footballer, meant to be the greatest thinker currently in British football, God. And Joey Barton was asked, why did UKIP do so well? He said, well, it's like going to a nightclub, isn't it? And there are 4 ugly women, but you pick the least ugly one and take her home with you. And Louise said, well, you've just got to prove, Joey, that footballers' brains are only in their feet. I think she could have used another part of the anatomy, but never mind. The point I'm making is that they're doing well. Diane James, who nearly won the Eastleigh by-election for us, has now become, you know, a well-known UKIP commentator. So you're going to see a very different face of UKIP from now on. But I do not support European legislation that says 40% of the boardroom have to be women. I don't support that agenda. It should happen on merit.
I can, by the way, exclusively announce that Joey Barton will be the keynote speaker. He'll double up the football forum at the same time. Are you over there?
Fiona Jeffrey. Nigel, what's your view on the recent vote on Scottish independence and its impact on the UK and how you see it moving forward?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Mr. Salmond and I don't exactly get on. And when I went to Scotland last July to try and put a UKIP argument into the referendum debate, I was attacked by a mob of about 80 yobbos in the street, and the police locked me in a pub for my own protection. Now, how about that? I've been kicked out of a few over the years, but I've never actually been locked in one. And there was an old boy in the corner of me saying, God, this is the best thing that's happened here for 40 years.
I refuse to believe that was your first lock-in.
Yeah, normally, is to keep the police out. But I went back to Scotland during this campaign, and Alex Salmond has said, we do not want Mr Farage coming to Scotland. UKIP has no voice here. It understands nothing of Scotland. You know, incredibly, frankly, if we're going to use the word racist, let's use it about Salmond. Let's use it about the Boot Boy supporters that the SNP have got, who frankly are vile about the English. Well, something very exciting has happened, because UKIP made a breakthrough in the European elections, and we now have one of the 6 Scottish MEPs. UKIP now has a voice in Scotland. And the guy that's been elected for UKIP in Scotland is an openly gay, larger-than-life wheeler-dealer, and he's going to establish, you know, a big role for himself in the Scottish debate. Because the one thing that has not been exposed in the Scottish referendum is that Salmond wants to separate from London but be part of the European Union and have nearly all of his laws decided in Brussels. He is not offering the people of Scotland independence. He's offering them a provincial part of a United States of Europe, and UKIP will expose that over the course of the summer, and Salmond will lose that referendum, and quite rightly too.
Excellent. Can I see more hands up? Well, despite him not really being a real person, I can't really avoid Mr. Ian Taylor.
Ian Taylor. Mr. Farage, you gave your speech in English, not in the language of Malta, which is not a criticism, but I want to know what bothers you about people speaking languages other than English on a train in Britain, and what exactly you meant when you talked at your conference in February about Britain becoming a foreign land.
I've never said that. That was William Hague's speech in 2000, if you're confusing. Hague said in 2000 that there are people now who begin to feel we're living in a foreign country. I've never actually said that. What I said was this, that if you have let's just think about the numbers here, all right? Just think about the numbers. Of all the European countries, the one that has always been the most relaxed about immigration and immigrants is the United Kingdom. You know, we're the ones that have given refuge to the Jews who are being persecuted in Russia, to the Jews being persecuted in Germany and Austria, and indeed we gave refuge to the French Huguenots, didn't we, back in the 18th century, of which my family were a part. Post-war, you know, we ran an immigration policy from our former colonies, in many ways as a debt repayment after massive sacrifices they made helping us, defending us in 2 world wars. And if you go from 1950, or 53, from Windrush, right up until the time that Mr. Blair became Prime Minister, all right, we had roughly 30 to 40,000 people a year coming to settle in Britain. Since Mr. Blair came to power, and up to the current day, it is now 500,000 people a year. 500,000. On the current trends, another 10 million will come in the next 20 years. I suspect if the Eurozone continues for much longer, it may be significantly higher than that. And surely the argument is clear and logical, and it goes back to what John Howard, the Australian Prime Minister, said, that if you're going to have immigration into a country, you have it at a rate that is sustainable and allows you to integrate people within that society. And what we've done in many of our cities, and indeed many of our market towns, in England particularly, is we've allowed whole sectors of those towns to be developed with this massive rush of people where English is not spoken. I don't want to live in a country where people speak different languages. I don't want to live in a country where people are allowed to have different religious codes. You know, the idea that we should turn a blind eye to Sharia law in Leicester, for example. I want to live in a country that has a sensible immigration policy where our kids can play football together and speak to each other in the same language.
There was a hand up down here, I believe.
Yes, my question, Nigel, is about your interest in implementing a point system like Australia in terms of immigrants into the UK. Now, we have a tourist industry that, particularly the inbound industry, that is very seasonal, and a lot of it depends on people from all across the European Union working in our hotels, restaurant, retail sector. So if you bring in a point system, the impact on the industry in terms of finding those people for the seasonal variation in demand for employees, how do you feel that will impact it?
Well, I think what we've lost is we've lost the distinction between people coming just to work and people coming to settle. We've lost it completely. The answer to your question is quite simple. You know, if we have a shortage of labour, we can make up for that by giving people work permits. It's quite straightforward. You know, if any of us want to get a job in almost any other part of the world, we have to get a work permit. And that work permit allows us to go to that country for a period of time to work, and then we have to leave. And that is how we would operate, particularly with seasonal labour, as you say. People would have work permits. But what they wouldn't have, and shouldn't have, in my opinion, is automatic rights to the benefit system in our country. And everyone's lost sight of this. That actually, if you come to Britain and get a job on minimum wage and say you intend to stay, you qualify for in-work benefits from day one. And there is something, I think, fundamentally wrong with that. So let's operate a work permit system for seasonal labour. And I know there are many in this room I've spoken to already who say there is a big problem with getting British kids to take some of these jobs. And I understand that, but by the same token, there are an awful lot of unemployed British youngsters struggling for work. And we've really allowed ourselves, I think, to become the cheap labour capital, really, of Western Europe. And the minimum wage in many cases now has become the maximum wage. So I've somewhat revised my free market thinking. I think there is such a thing as society, and I think we've compressed wages for our own workers and population to an extent that's not been healthy. But if we need seasonal workers, whether it's in hotels, whether it's picking strawberries, we do it on a work permit system and a limited time to stay and no entitlement to social benefits for that period of time.
Yes. One more question here, then I'll take one further question. No, you've had one already. One further question from a real person who hasn't asked a question before.
Hello, Nigel. My name is Bridget Major from Northumbria University. This is rather a personal question. I hope you don't mind.
Oh dear.
Bloody hell.
No, I didn't. Honestly, I promise.
A few of us have been speculating about the origins of your name. Because Farage, as in the French age, or savage, as in sauvage, has rather a European French ring to it.
Yeah, the original spelling of my name, it was a French spelling. It was Ferouge, F-E-R-U-I-G-E, was the original spelling of it. And my family lived on the eastern border of France and Luxembourg, and they were Protestants. They were Protestants, and they took political refugee status in this country. So there you are. I'm Johnny Foreigner, all right?
So, a semi-Frenchman married to a German, you poor sod. Does she invade you 3 times? No. Do we have one more
I'd said that,
question?
I'd be in terrible trouble, wouldn't I?
Yeah. Yes, you would, so I thought I'd be in trouble. Go on.
Hi Nigel, just a quick one. I think I get UKIP policies about leaving the EU and reasons not to do it, and policy about, or your views on incoming immigrants or whatever else. I don't get any real sense of what your other policies are. And you managed to get to be the largest party in the EU elections without really having any clear statements of policy. And I just wondered, when and how are you going to tell all of us exactly what your policies are?
Well, that was quite deliberate. It was quite deliberate. You know, I refused to answer questions on domestic policy because we were fighting a European election, and I wanted to try and engage Cameron and Miliband in a debate on the issues. Clegg I did, thanks to him giving me the opportunity, but the others point-blank refused to discuss them. We will unveil a full range of domestic policies at our conference this September in Doncaster, which is in Ed Miliband's constituency. But I'll just give you one. I'll just give you one policy that I feel really, really strongly about. There are 7% of the kids in our country whose parents can afford to send them to private schools. And those 7% are now dominating business, the media, industry, sport. They're dominating our country in a way, frankly, we've never seen before. And there are tens of thousands of our young kids who are going to big comprehensives where there's a law and order problem, where there's a language problem in many cases, and we've taken away from many of our brightest young kids the greatest motor of social mobility by the wanton vandalism and destruction of hundreds of grammar schools that have been in our country for centuries.
Ladies and gentlemen, I sense we could go on for a very, very long time. Mercifully, Nigel, I believe, is around for some time yet.
I'm coming for lunch, absolutely.
Are you pulling another all-nighter this evening?
No, I should be very quiet tonight. Honestly.
Very quiet tonight.
I've got the new by-election tomorrow. So.
Yes, I'm sure that telepathic campaigning is working superbly. On your behalf, this is an immensely busy time for Nigel personally. It's the Queen's speech today, it's the Newark by-elections he referred to tomorrow. To honour this commitment when there were plenty of alibis for doing something else ever so slightly less fun instead is a very noble cause indeed. So for that, and for much, much else, ladies and gentlemen, can I give our thanks to Nigel Farage.